Welcome to my humble observatory pod. What I got here is a ZWO 585 Planetary cam, or you could use it as a guide cam. It is a color cam. And what you see here is a TeleVue PowerMate 2X. And there is a T adapter that they sell for this PowerMate, because you can use this for eyepieces and other ways of connecting it, whether it be a DSLR or one of these ZWO cams or any cam that has T-threads. By doing it this way, you have a direct, solid connection that's threaded. This is what we're going to be using tonight. Now, I have a workshop on my channel that talks about using an eyepiece for planetary imaging. It's a Batter Zoom 8x24. And when you attach this camera or any camera with T-threads onto it, you can zoom into the object of interest or zoom out and adjust for the seeing. I've been doing that and having some good results, but I haven't tried this yet in this Ioptron 150 Moxitove. Now, the focal length on this is 1,800 millimeters, and I believe it's f12. So when you do use it for deep sky, you have to bin 2x2 just to get to a decent resolution that's achievable. But tonight we're going to be doing planetary imaging. Let's load this into the Moxitove and then jump over to the laptop and start working the software so you guys can see how this is done. Okay, so we're on the laptop here, and we're going to open up ASI Studio, which is downloadable from the ZWO website. This is a free download. Okay, so these are some pretty interesting utilities that they provide here, and they are free. And you know, you can delve around in this at your leisure and understand it a little bit more. It's not super complicated because the interface is pretty simple as opposed to some of these other capture programs like Nina. So let's move over to the utility that we're interested in here for this workshop, and that's planetary imaging. So we're going to single click on that. So here we have Jupiter in the frame, and one of the first things you're going to have to do is get her into focus. Now, one of the easiest ways to do that, I kind of overexpose it so I can get those moons of Jupiter showing up on the frame, because those are the pinpoints of light you want to focus in on. So I think I'm going to go with that. All right. So now that we've established some kind of focus, we need to get our exposure corrected. And in this ASI Cap AP version 2.7, we can pull down a number of exposure increments, and I find that usually this one, once you get on it, is the one you want. And the gain for this camera, the best gain is 252. That's pretty much what the specs calls for. Now, when I was using native, when the camera was in there with the native focal length of 1,800 millimeters, this setting was good enough. But now we are at 3,600 millimeters because we've got the PowerMate in there. So, of course, the longer focal length means that it's going to be dimmer. It looks to me, even though the gain is ideally set at 252, we don't have much of a choice but to increase the gain here in order to get that brighter. So we'll do that instead. Now, the seeing right now isn't the greatest, and I think it's kind of obvious there that it isn't. Getting it, moving it up a little bit. I'm going to do a region of interest. This is another thing you want to do, is a region of interest, so that you can reduce your file sizes. Now, in this ASI cap, it's right click and then drag. Then it asks you that, and then it makes this thing bigger. And if you move this around, it will move the target in relationship to your chip. So right now, if we moved it up just a taste, it would be left click and move it up. I can get it moved up. That's that drops it down, and if we go this way it should bring it up a little bit. It's very sensitive, so that's good right there. Okay, so this gives you that little box that we just saw earlier so that you can move the region of interest. This will open up the chip. Instead of a region of interest, it will open it up to where you're utilizing the whole chip. This will put a reticle on there so that you can get dead center if you so desire. This one here, set the image to 100%, so that will make it to 100%. So that's what we're really looking at. Set image to fit the window, and that's already done because it's fitting the window. So if you wanted to, of course, make it maximize it, you would do that. It's really distorted here. It's not very good at all, which makes planetary imaging kind of challenging, because this is dependent upon the weather. You need really good seeing to pull this off, because we're at really super high magnification here. I'm going to drop the shutter here a little bit and darken that up just a skosh. Let's get that down a little bit now that we got our gain pulled up, because you don't want to blow it out there. See, now doing that, it's bringing a little more detail in up at the poles, if you notice, in between the seeing. So, and then over here you have your histogram, and you can see where this is plotting. So then we draw it down here, and you can select the amount of frames that you're going to shoot for. Now, because we've got this region of interest, we can grab up to 3,000 frames really, and it'll go pretty quick because we're not downloading the entire chip. You can do an auto run here if you decide you want to set up like some sort of a sequence. I really don't use that because you're basically just onesie-twosies with this. If you click on this, this will give you a photograph, so it'll give you 3,000 photographs, and I guess it just depends upon your software whether it works better with that or video. The software we're going to be using uses the video, and it's very easy to process with the video, and that'll be the next step of this workshop. So let's hit the video. There we go. And so now if you look down here, it's saying all the way over to the left, it's saying it's already captured 787 frames. And the size of the file is going to be almost over 2 gigabytes, it looks like. Pretty big. Normally I shoot 2,000, but because of the seeing, I felt let's go 3. So it is capturing 95 frames a second. That's pretty amazing. And guys, it's already finished. It's done. That's how quick this cam is, this 585. I've used a DSLR, Canon 6D, and the best I could do with that was like maybe 12 frames a second if I cropped the sensor down, and nowhere near that kind of frame capture. Okay, so the data from that other night wasn't very good, so I gave it another attempt with better seeing, and this is what's going on here, and this looks much better right here. So let's get started on this one. So when you go to put the shutter speed up, I adjust this to where the green channel is right at about 150 if you're using this program. So let's grab this. I believe we've got the red spot right here and a transit going on right there. So I want to grab this before this passes. So here we go. I'm going to grab 1,000 frames here. And yeah, this could be pretty cool. That's got to be a transit going on there from the looks of it. And that's the red spot in the upper right hand corner there, I'd say. I can look at Sky Safari here. Yep, there's a transit there. That's absolutely a transit. I believe it's Europa. It's the only moon in that proximity, so it's definitely a Europa transit right here, guys, right there. Very cool. Okay, Now that we've got that under our belt, let's move over to the processing side of this equation. Okay, folks, we're going to open up our first software utility, which is going to be AS3, and we'll click on that. This is downloadable, by the way. There are other programs out there that will accomplish a similar task. I use this one. This is a free download. It also has some features that I like. So if you like to experiment, you can try some others, but in this workshop, this is what we're going to be using. This is the first step. So here we're going to open up our video file, and these are 2 of Jupiter, 2 of Mars. We're going to pick this one for Jupiter, open it, and then what happens is it populates that second window. Now, if you were to open up a moon file, it would be big like this as well. So what we want to do in order to get a little kind of perspective on that, we're going to come over to here on the left-hand side on the Zoom tab and zoom it back some so we get a little more room here and see what we're doing. Put that here, and then here we're going to crop this out by coming up here, getting that down that way, moving it over that way, a little bit there. Okay, so on this first tab that we opened, you see it says planet, and if we were dealing with the moon, it would be surface. So I pretty much leave all of these defaults, and the way we're going to stack it is through alignment points, local AP. Over here we have the size of the alignment point. So for a target this small, you want to get these kind of small if you can. I'm going to bring this down. 16 is the smallest you can go on this. So we're going to place that, and you get 128 points. If we were to go 24 size and place it, we only get 60. So the smaller the target, the smaller you'd like to have the alignment point size. We'll place that on there, and now we wind up with 128. This minimum brightness point, you can go up or down. The higher the threshold, the less you'll probably get. I usually leave it at 5, and so once we set that, you could also manually draw it. I don't recommend that. Sometimes you do need to do that if you're doing solar, but for planets, this auto placement is usually your best bet. You can get deeper into this, of course, but for this demonstration, we're not going to get too crazy here. So again, we're going to go 24 and then hit place APs. Now, it really did quite a few for us. I mean, that 285, that's going to be a pretty good alignment. What's nice about this, let's zoom back out so we can see this, is that we're getting overlapping alignment points, and that is what you want. This looks like a nice grid that we got here. So we're really going to be able to dial this in and get this image really aligned pretty well with that kind of alignment points. Again, that's what you want, overlapping alignment points. So this auto placement usually works pretty good. Now that we've done that, we'll come over here and we'll analyze the video. So it's going to analyze it. We click the number 2 button, and it's going to create a graph for us to tell us how bad or good the seeing was. And with that information, we'll determine what the percentage of the stack's going to be. So we're at 83, 84. So it's going through the entire 3,000 frames and seeing who's keepers and who should be thrown out pretty much. That's not too shabby, actually. That's not too shabby at all. Considering the seeing, I didn't even think we'd get that kind of good. Now here's about the middle line, and as you can see, we have some pretty good data towards the middle of that 3,000 capture at the 1,500 mark, to where we're up here above that 50%. So that's pretty good. That's not bad. So you can break this down into 4 quarters. So if you look right here, this to me would be 50%. We got 50%, that's not too bad. So we're going to raise this up to 50% of the frame capture. There's two ways you can do it. You can do number of frames or percentage. I like to work with the percentage because this is, again, is working in percentage. This helps me determine what the percentage should be. If this was opposite and it was down here, then I would go lower. So here is the stack output file, TIFF, ping, or fit. Our program that we're going to be using, RegiStack, works well with TIFF files, so that will be our output file. So now that we've analyzed it, now that we've put our alignment points, the next step is to stack it. We're going to leave the drizzle off. We're going to save it in the same folder that the video file came off. We're not going to do RGB align. You're welcome to experiment with that. We're going to leave this at default, and we're not going to sharpen it because it tends to over sharpen it. So I just leave these pretty much like that and hit stack. And so now it'll go through the entire 3,000 frames and pick out the best 50% that we've asked it to do. And so it'll just take a minute or two, depending on your computing power and the size of your file. And now it's actually stacking the image. And all that information is readily available right up here. Okay, 88%, 89, 90. All right, we're coming to the home stretch at 95%, 97, and 100. And it's done. It'll tell you that down there, and I'll tell you that down here. So the next step would be to open RegiStack. We'll close this and come over to where it says select and open this file up. Some guys use it for stacking and aligning for deep sky, and I believe even for Planetary, but it's a pretty good tool. It is a free download, and we're using it for Planetary imaging to apply wavelets. This is where the magic begins. So this upper one, I usually slide it all the way over about 90%. And just with that, you can see that transit right there. So we'll bring this over a little bit more. Now we're starting to see the red spot right there. And bring a little more. And now we're starting to get a little more definition. Now this was imaged at the native focal length of that ioptron, 1800 millimeter. Okay, right there. I don't want to go too much because see, we're starting to introduce some noise. We don't want to go too crazy here. And we'll come over to this one. It's a little bit better. Now, here's Europa. You can see it right there. And that's the shadow. How cool is that? Now, this is why I don't use sharpening in the other program prior to this step, because it'll be over sharpened by that time. Now, this lower one, you got to be careful with because this will introduce some noise. You don't want to go too far with this one. And, you know, this is a matter of playing around with it and deciding which you could drag it over. See that kind of really brings it up. But I don't like to overdo it because we're going to do another step here. And so you could slide it around. You see how that brightens it up. And then I try to get about a middle ground here. Don't want to do too much. This requires some practice, you know, and you could try different formulas, but you could see how it slide it over and it softens up. And I'm thinking right about there. I don't want to introduce too much noise. So if this was the moon, this whole window would be opened up. And in order to apply these wavelets without taxing the system and getting quick results, you want to double click on the area where you want to apply wavelets. Because this is such a small area here, it's not a problem. And if you were doing the moon, then you would double click, apply the wavelets. When you like what you saw, then you would come over here and say do all, and then it would do the entire image. It might take a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but you'd see it kind of coming down and coming down and coming down. So now we're going to save this, and we're going to name it JDone Save. And now we're done with this program. And now I open up Photoshop. You might have Lightroom or some other program. And for this step, what I do is I use Unmask Sharp. And there it is. And that's not too bad, just the way it is. So let's orientate this. I believe the way I saw it was about like that in Sky Safari. So here's Europa, and here is the transit of Europa and the red spot right here. So we'll pull it back, but it's zoomed in at 200%. Now that's 100%. So now we'll come over to Filters, Sharpen, Unmask Sharp, and you see what that did. It really made that red pop pretty good right there. And so that's why I don't sharpen prior to Photoshop. You have a lot more control, whereas that other program you don't have any control whatsoever. Now, if the seeing was good, we could increase the magnification. But unless you have really good seeing, it's kind of hard to go above 2000, 2500 focal length. And so this was 1800. Okay, I'm calling it. This demonstration is certainly good enough. So if you look up here, you could see one of the belt regions and a darker streak here. And of course we have the transit right there, the red spot right there, and Europa right there. And that's, if we zoom in, again, that's 200%. All right, so we got lucky. We caught a transit. That's always cool. All right, so here's an example of good seeing and bad seeing with Jupiter. And as you could see on the left there, that is below average seeing. And on the right, what you see is average to above average seeing. It's rare night that you can get excellent seeing here in South Dakota. So the most you can hope for on most nights is above average. But you can get some pretty decent images even with above average. The night that we captured this in the pod, it was definitely below average, and it might have even been poor at times. Okay. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this workshop. I hope you found it useful, and hope we get some more members stepping forward and sharing what they know, so that all of us can get just a little bit better each time we go out. Until next time, y'all stay safe and clear skies.